Wassalam ala Rasulullah. Welcome everyone to the Friday Forum. For those that are here for the first time, the Friday Forum is an event that happens every Friday night where we discuss different topics for young adults. Inshallah, tonight's session we're going to be having an AMA with Shaykh Osamah. Before we start, I just want to ask the brothers if they don't have any back problems, if they could just please come a little bit closer, inshallah. For those that don't have any back problems or don't need the wall, if we can just get closer, inshallah.
Yeah, Allah.
Before we get started, and like I said, we are going to be using the Slido. So if you could use, you can scan the QR code to ask your questions. We do ask that you're mindful of the questions that are being asked. Just make sure that they're appropriate. For those that are joining us on the live stream, the QR code is available on the live stream. So if you also like to ask a question, you can certainly ask the question as well. Before we get started, just a couple of announcements. Alhamdulillah, all the programs at the masjid are resuming this weekend. We have this Saturday, we have our Basics of Islam course with Shaykh Osamah. This happens Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. We also have the Diseases of the Heart class with the Shaykh. That is on Sundays at 6:30 p.m. at this masjid. This Sunday, inshallah, we'll be starting our new Fajr fitness program. We'll be praying Fajr at the masjid, and then we'll be going to a nearby park for a jog. So please join us. We'll be meeting right after Fajr, which is going to be at 4:30 a.m. this Sunday. Please join us if you can. It's for brothers, but if there is an interest for sisters, we're also open to opening it up as well for the sisters. We also do have another program coming up. We have our summer night festival, night market. It's going to take place on Saturday, July 22nd from 4 to 9 p.m. It'll be at this masjid. We'll have a variety of food vendors, clothing vendors, and craft vendors, as well as kids' activities. So please bring your whole family. Again, it's going to be on Saturday, July 22nd. So with that, I'll give it to the Shaykh. We'll start with the dua, and then we'll start with the questions.
جزاك الله خير أخينا بارك الله فيك الله يكرمك يا رب أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. It's always important to remind ourselves with critical events that the ummah is dealing with on a larger scale. So I just want to remind everyone, please don't forget your brothers and sisters in Palestine from your dua. You very likely might have heard something about what happened in Jenin in the past days in terms of what the occupation did and the shuhada, a lot of injuries and a lot of devastation. And now the recent air raids also in Nablus. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be with the people of Palestine and to relieve it of the Israeli apartheid. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve all those facing afflictions in the east and west. It's very important that we include people of afflictions in our dua. To remember the ummah of Muhammad ﷺ in dua. Make a dua for people across the globe, in Palestine, in Syria, in Turkey, in Iraq, in Burma, in Kashmir, in Yemen, in parts of Africa, and Egypt. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be with all those who are facing difficulties and trials in their life, and to be with us as we face difficulties and trials in our life as well. Allahumma ameen. اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الشكر كله لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت سبحانك كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم صل وسلم على حبيبك وعبدك المختار سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم بارك لنا في أعمالنا وأعمالنا وأرزاقنا وأهلنا وذوينا وأحبابنا. اللهم اجعل لنا من كل ضيق مخرجا ومن كل هم فرجا. اللهم اجعل لنا من بعد العسر يسرا. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك ربنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن شر الشيطان ومن شر كل ذي شر أنت أعلم به منا ومن شر فتن الليل والنهار. اللهم لا تجعل الشيطان علينا سبيلا ولا تجعل الكافرين ولا للمنافقين علينا سبيلا. أحطنا بعين عنايتك احرسنا بعينك التي لا تنام. أدخلنا في حفظك وحرزك وكنفك ورعايتك من كل سوء ومكروه أنت به عليم. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولوالدي والدينا ولأبنائنا وبناتنا وبناتنا وإخواننا وأخواتنا وأزواجنا وذرياتنا اللهم أصلحنا وأصلح بنا واهدنا واهد بنا واجعلنا سببا لمن اهتدى. Oh Allah, we call upon you, we pray to you, beseech you, we ask you to make us steadfast upon guidance. Fill our heart with your abundant light and fill our homes with your abundant light. Make us of those who love you and love your Prophet ﷺ and love our deen and understand our deen. We ask you, O Allah, to bless our community and to bless our families and to make this space a space of dhikr, a space of knowledge, a space of amal and activism. We ask you, Allah, to better our conditions and the conditions of the Muslims in the East and West. We ask you to bless our lives and our livelihood and to make the best of our actions the last of our actions, the best of our days, the last of our days, and the best of all days, the day we meet you and you're pleased with us. We ask you, O Allah, to erase from our hearts hypocrisy. We ask you to erase from our hearts the effects of our wrongdoing. O Allah, we ask you to erase from our hearts the effects of the shaitan and the effects of our sinfulness. We ask you to push away from us hardships and heartache and pain. We ask you to make us of those who are steadfast until we meet you and you're pleased with us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ameen, ameen, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As Akhi Nail mentioned, we're using this Slido. So if you have questions, please send them there. And I guess at certain junctures throughout, maybe we could take some direct questions as well, inshallah. I don't know if we have anything coming in yet, or...
Yes, there's one question. So the question says that someone is praying, they make dua, and they do good, but they don't see themselves getting anywhere in life, and it doesn't seem like that their duas are being answered. It was just asking for some advice.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be with you and guide you forward and guide us all forward. Allahumma ameen. Look, it's very important to note that, in order for me to emerge from a difficult situation that I find myself in my life, there needs to be a number of factors that are at play. Dua is one of them. It's a critical one of them. It's not the only one of them, though. It's not sufficient to just make dua and then hope for everything to be erased from your life. It is very important that you figure out, what's the cause of these feelings? Is there a stressor? Are there triggers that lead you to feel the way you feel? And then perhaps you need to go about figuring out how to address these issues. A lot of the times you need to gain perspective on your life and the direction forward. And you might not be able to get that perspective on your own. Maybe you can go to someone you trust, a mentor, an advisor, someone who's more knowledgeable or someone who's more experienced in life that could give you some feedback. This is always a critical part of it. Don't ever suffice yourself with dua. Dua is a starting point and an end point. It's something that stays with you throughout. And that is your direct connection with Allah Azza wa Jalla. It definitely opens doors. Don't ever underestimate the power of dua. However, with that, as I said, sometimes there are certain situations in life that need to be actively resolved. And they need a strategy. This applies to a lot of different things. So that's my advice to you. If you can't figure it out on your own, don't be too shy or proud to seek someone's help in helping you figure it out. There's one of the wisdoms of old. They say, the scholars, they teach us that there are two things that stop someone from asking. Either haya or kibr. Either they're too shy or embarrassed. What will people say? What will people think? I don't want to be vulnerable. Or, I can't let myself look like I don't know. I'll never ask. I shouldn't ask. Why should I ask? I should know this already. Right? So these are two things that often cause a lot of damage to people. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from them. That's a short advice, but of course the question is generic, and I hope that helps in some way.
There was another question about dua, but someone is making dua for their family member to be merciful, but they're not seeing any change, and they're kind of just losing kind of hope and kind of causing despair. If you can just maybe add a little bit more to some more advice on that.
So losing hope in a family member becoming more merciful, you're making a lot of dua that they become more merciful, but they're not, right? Look, it's very important to realize this. The guidance of people is not something that's in my hands, or your hands, or in the hands of the best of people. The Prophet ﷺ himself was told in the Quran, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ. The Quran says it. You don't guide those whom you love, but Allah guides whom He wills. And He is very well aware of those who are guided. This is a verse in the Quran. This is a manhaj haya. I should never deal with people, engage people on the level that I convince myself that I should be able to guide them with my own hands. No, leave it to Allah. The best I could do is do the best that I have. Maybe perhaps that'll help this person become merciful. Maybe the obstacle in the way of your family member becoming merciful is your demeanor, your attitude. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I could bring out the best in someone and sometimes I could bring out the worst. Let me at least try that. If I've tried everything that's in my capacity and this person does not want to, doesn't have the will to be merciful, then this is out of my hands. But at least I am going to try. That's why this is even advice for parents, by the way. This is advice for parents. Who's responsible for birr when it comes to this relationship between the parents and the children? Who do you think? You guys know what birr means, right? Benevolence. Who's responsible for birr? Parents or children? Huh? MashaAllah, you guys are very awake. All right, so who's responsible for birr? It's actually a shared responsibility. Of course, the bulk of the responsibility of birr and the accountability is going to be on the shoulder of the children. But the scholars from old teach us, help your children have birr of you. Help your children be benevolent children to you. Right? This is advice. Sometimes the parents could make it very easy and very attainable, and sometimes they could make it very difficult. And I don't want my child to fail. I want my child to succeed in having a healthy relationship with me. So I should, as a parent, make that attainable. Now, what the sister was referring to was, that man who came to Sayyidina Umar, complaining about the uquq of his son. He was complaining about the rebelliousness of his son. And then the son explained to Sayyidina Umar what the father did not afford to him. And so Sayyidina Umar told him, لَقَدْ عَقَقْتَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَعُقَّقْ. Right? You have led him to these ends. Now, of course, it's not to justify wrongful behavior. Don't ever do that. There's nothing. Even if you're dealing with the worst of people, they still have a right on you. Don't ever allow your mind to be convinced that because my parents are in a way that allows me to react negatively to them. No, that's not what we're trying to say. But what we're trying to say is there is a shared responsibility. I could bring out the best in people, and I could bring out the worst in them. So the only thing I would advise for this person is do your due diligence in trying to help this person be merciful. If you've done that, then their matters to Allah. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. There's a question about, someone is asking to give guidance to them in regards to, they have an illness called Trichotillomania, and they are not unsure what to do in terms of how to get help for this illness, and they're just asking for guidance. I don't know if that's...
I don't know what the illness is. I'm not a doctor.
Me either.
Maybe
it's the most liked, so that's why I'm asking.
Does someone have an explanation? Would someone like to say something directly? Can you bring the microphone closer to yourself? Okay, and so the question is exactly what?
They're asking for guidance. They're not sure what to do in terms of getting treatment or help.
Talk to a doctor. Yeah, talk to a doctor. I don't have that type of background. So if the question is on how to alleviate anxiety, I could help with that. Anything besides that, I can't help with you. I wish I had that expertise. But alhamdulillah, we have people in our community that do. So how to relieve anxiety, there's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of, it's very important to make it sure that it's something that's consistent on a daily basis. Alhamdulillah, we have a fixture in our days that's supposed to help us relieve anxiety, and that's our salawat. And if my salah is not relieving my anxiety, then maybe perhaps I'm not praying the right way. Maybe that's something I need to invest my time in. How can I learn how to pray? How can I learn how to effectively remember Allah Azza wa Jal? And actually, there's a lot into this. There's a lot into this. This is actually a skill to hone, believe it or not. Skill. Really? There's a skill on how to pray? Of course there's a skill on how to pray. Of course. If you just up, down, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, run for the doors, of course you're not going to gain, so you're going to be more stressed out probably. If you're praying on edge and can't wait till you finish, you're going to walk away with more stress than you went into it probably. So the Prophet ﷺ would find peace in prayers. Arihna biha, ya Bilal. Give us rest in our prayers. I need to hone this skill on how to pray. That takes a knowledge and a know-how of the symbolism in prayers. What's the value in ruku'? The symbolism in sujood, prostration. The nearest point that I have to my Creator is in my sujood. Why? I need to be a reflective person. You know, one of the things that will relieve your anxiety greatest is finding ways that help you, that are conducive to reflection. Create an environment that helps you reflect on positive things. What is this type of environment? Hey, you know what? Maybe you need to go out to a certain place. Maybe you need to remove yourself from certain things. If your phone, if your TV, if your home is a distraction, or if being around people is a distraction, there's this idea in our deen of temporary seclusion, uzla or khulwa. There's this idea. That's why we have i'tikaf, right? Maybe I need to retreat away from my normal routine to gain clarity of mind. That's what the Prophet ﷺ would do when he would go to Ghar Hira. I need to do things like that. You'll find these things. There's many things where you could create a scene that is very conducive for reflection. The more you'll reflect, the more you'll actually find that this anxiety could be released from your body. And sometimes it could be helpful to have a friend in this journey. Not doing it alone, because maybe alone you might not know how to reflect. It takes time to learn how to reflect, how to remember Allah, how to pray. But maybe perhaps the energy of being in the presence of one or more good people might help you relieve that stress and anxiety. Right now, the greatest release for stress and anxiety is the spiritual release. Now, other people find other releases, but they're very short-lived. What are the releases that people find for stress and anxiety? Going hang out with friends, going on a vacation, right? Going to a fun place, having a fun night out. These things release anxiety, but they're very short-lived, right? Some people find their release in anxiety in working out and in physical activity. They get all of that negative energy out of their body. It's very effective. It's very good. It does definitely have merit. But if you could find that by unlocking the power of your soul, I think you're going to find a lot of relief to anxiety. So maybe that's something for you to think about. Think about how to do reflection. Look it up. There's a lot of videos about this stuff. I can't give you that all in one lecture. Maybe we can have different talks about this, or in one answer, I mean. Look it up. How can I enhance my prayers? How can I enhance my remembrance of Allah? How can I really start feeling something deeper with dua? How can I start reflecting? What should I reflect on? These are things that maybe perhaps might, enlighten your path. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. So there's a question in regards to someone who is struggling with depression, and they're also struggling with prayer. Just asking for advice in terms of what to do.
Look, if you're struggling with depression, it depends on what you're telling me is the cause of your depression. What type, do you have clinical depression? Are you diagnosed? Are you taking medication? Or are you just someone who has day-to-day depression? You're feeling down because of your circumstance and because of the negativity around you, or whatever it is. Why do you feel depressed? Is it because of behavioral things? If that's the case, then we have a lot to work with. Even with the other clinical depression, there's some ways that with the there's some ways that you could at least release the stressor, lessen the stressors and the effects of these stressors on your life, if you figure out what they are. That's why you go to therapy. That's why you talk about it with somebody. But basically, in terms of your prayers, the best thing that you could do for yourself to figure out prayers is the idea of good companionship. There's a reason why we have Salat al-Jama'ah. There's a reason why we have Masajid. There's a reason why we get together to remember Allah Azza wa Jal. There's a lot of goodness in it. If you're struggling with your prayers, find someone or insert yourself in someone else's life that you feel is good or that's practicing. And you know what? Maybe that'll help you. Just start, make a plan with somebody. It needs, these things need an investment. It depends on how much do you really care about finding a solution to this issue. If it's a really big priority for you, then you know what? Guess what? You're going to need to put a lot of effort into this. I'm going to need to sit down with one or two people. You know what? Maybe you could be my prayer buddy. You'll remind me of prayers. I'll remind you of prayers. We'll strengthen each other. Maybe we'll get together and pray outside of the masjid. Maybe we'll go together to the masjid and pray. I think that this is one of the most effective things for someone who struggles with praying. Don't do it by yourself. Liken it to a child when they're trying to learn how to ride a bike. Imagine a little kid trying to learn a bike all by themselves. It's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be very, very difficult. But what do we have in the very beginning? You have the parent helping them. You have training wheels, right? And then they practice for a while, and then you take off the training wheels, and all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier, right, to ride a bike. There's a process to it, right? So this is the same idea here. If I'm someone who's trying to get used to pray the 5 daily prayers, and I'm finding difficulty, let me find someone help me, and that's okay. That's why we have Salat al-Jama'ah. And the same thing with depression. Like I said, that's what I would advise with, one solution for depression.
There's one question. There's one question in regards to someone has a bad habit. They've been doing this habit for many years. They vowed to change after Ramadan, but they're still relapsing, and just they want some kind of advice in regards to the habit.
That's pretty generic. There's a wide range of bad habits. There's bad habits that can destroy you and your family, and then there's other bad habits that are just, that's inappropriate. Right, there's a big spectrum of bad habits. So it really depends on what you're talking about. And if your bad habit, so to say, has become an addiction. Right? If it's an addiction, then it needs something more aggressive in terms of treatment. If it's the type of bad habit that's an addiction, then you need aggressive treatment for it. You need to sit down and talk with somebody and maybe perhaps get some advice on how to not keep on falling into it. Right? Like some bad habits could be very lustful in nature. Some bad habits could be going to, resorting to drugs or, something like that. These bad habits we call addictions, right? But if it's not to that level and it's just something minor, I would need more details to figure out. You're going to need to give more to get more. Allah Alam.
There's one question in regards to the term Israel, Bani Israel, mentioned so many times in the Quran, specifically in an ayah where it speaks about giving the Jews the Palestinian land. They're asking just to elaborate further on this.
So, look, obviously, before there's a long history for the history of Palestine. Before the Muslims were there, before the Jews were given that land, there was a people that lived in these lands, the Canaaniyin. And before them, there's a long history. You could read it, the history of Palestine. Now, what the Quran mentions is that they were blessed with this land, but that there was a refusal and a rejection on their part to follow their messenger into the blessed land. The Quran says, يا قوم ادخلوا الأرض المقدسة التي كتب الله لكم ولا ترتدوا على أدباركم. All right, so, O my people, enter the blessed land. But there was a refusal with Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam to enter it. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to them, قال فإنها محرمة عليهم 40 سنة يتيهون في الأرض فلا تأس على القوم. It is forbidden upon that generation, the land, because of their rejection to follow their messenger, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, into it, it was forbidden upon them. And they were lost in the desert. They were made to be lost in the desert until that entire generation passed away. And then later on after that, with Sayyidina Yusha ibn Nun, they actually entered the blessed land. And then there's a whole history to that, about Bukht Nassar and so on and so forth. Buy a book about the history of Palestine and read it. But that's what the Quran says. So for a period of time it was forbidden. And that's what the Quran was. And the reason why it says, and the reason why it was forbidden was because they didn't listen to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. But later on, we know there's Yusha ibn Nun, and he led people from the children of Bani Israel into Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa. Allahu Alam.
Jazakallah khair. I'm going to ask a lighter question.
Take direct questions too.
Yeah, okay, inshallah. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask in person?
Okay.
Okay. Shy crowd today.
Shy
crowd tonight.
Shy crowd?
Shy crowd tonight. All right. A lighter question. Someone is asking, aside from the Quran, Shaykh, what are 3 books that have influenced you?
Interesting question. Besides the Quran, what are 3 books that have influenced me?
Yes.
Well, it depends. You're going to have to specify which subject. There's one book that I enjoyed reading during my time in Egypt, in Al-Azhar. We were reading it collectively as a group of friends. Myself, Shaykh Yasser, and a few others that are in different states now. It's called Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin. And it's basically an abridged version of Ihya Ulumuddin. Ihya Ulumuddin is one of the monumental works in our past by Imam Ghazali. It was abridged in Minhaj al-Qasidin by Ibn al-Jawzi. And then that was abridged by another scholar. His name is Ibn Qudamah al-Maqdisi in Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin. And the reason why this book is so special is because it gives a practical sense, it infuses spirituality into every part of our lives, right? It goes through adat and ibadat, and then it goes through munjiyat and muhlikat. These are the 4 chapters. Adat, mundane acts, the day-to-day, how people live their lives, and the spiritual aspects of those things. And then ibadat, the inward and outward dimensions of worship. And then the munjiyat, those matters that lead to salvation, and muhlikat, those matters that lead to ruin. So it's a very, very beautiful book. Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin is beautiful because Ihya Ulumuddin is massive, right? Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin is in 1 volume. And you can find this book translated. I don't know what the translation is called, but it's one of the... And the other reason why this book is very dear to me is because of the experience in reading it, right? We were a group of students of knowledge at the time, and each week we would read a few pages together and reflect, and that was a beautiful experience in memory during our time in Egypt. So that's one. If you go to books of fiqh, there's a few that I could say are very, very dear to me. Is that the sound system or the fireworks?
It's fireworks.
Fireworks?
Yes.
Wow. Didn't the 4th of July pass? The people still do fireworks? Alhamdulillah. Anyway, when it comes to fiqh, there's a few books that are very dear to me, but I don't know if they would necessarily be known to people who are of an English readership. In terms of English, one of the books One of the books that I really fell in love with in terms of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, thought it was a very, very beautiful book, a lot of illustration in it, a lot of detail, and I felt that there's a lot of meaning. There is Revelation by Mi'raj Muhyiddin. This is actually a book that I taught in the masjid here a few years back, the Meccan period of it. It's a very, very beautiful book. I think if you want to fall in love with a book, find a book in seerah, and it'll definitely, because of the content of it, you're going to find a lot of beauty there and a lot to love when you read about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. There's also this recent book that's been published about the lectures of Shaykh Yasir Qadi. I didn't get a chance to look at it yet, but I think that the lecture series of Shaykh Yasir Qadi has been made into a book, and it's recently been published. It would be interesting to read it as well. And really, I think the books that I connect with most are the ones that I end up teaching. So, and that's because you start, you delve deeper into it. It's not just a quick read that you put down and move on. Wallahu alam, that's a little bit about that, I guess.
Jazakallah khair. One question. This is regarding to a couple about to get married. She's caught.
Big shift.
Yeah, moving to a couple marriage questions. So it looks like it's a sister. She caught her fiance speaking to women on TikTok, and he keeps saying that they don't mean anything. She's just giving advice of whether she should consider.
She caught her fiance speaking to. What does that mean? Speaking inappropriately with women through TikTok. Is that what it is? So she's wondering if she should cut off the engagement or continue. We don't give this type of advice live on the air, right? You need to really talk about this is the type of these are big life decisions. You can't just send a question through Slido. Decide, I'm going to text the guy, it's over, right? No, that's not how you deal with these types of things. These are big decisions. Marriage, divorce, ending relationships, beginning relationships. So my advice would be, gain the courage to sit down with somebody, whatever, imam, sheikh, advisor, mentor, whoever you're comfortable with. And I'd be happy to help if you want to ask the question. But because usually there's more to the story. How far did it go? How bad was it? What was the nature of the communication? Are you clear on exactly what happened? Because sometimes there might be confusion. There might be a gray area. Are you clear on what happened? And if everything checks off, then of course, if it's as bad as it sounds through text message, then this is a very big red sign. If before even committing to the relationship, there is already this sense of lack of commitment. That doesn't really speak well to what this relationship might look for. But again, we need to explore these avenues. It needs to be a detailed, don't be quick to pull triggers. Don't be quick to pull the trigger, right? Think things through and make sure that you make the right decision, do your due diligence, because this is a big life decision. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. There's another similar question about someone who's engaged, but they keep speaking to their ex, and they're just afraid that they're going to break their fiance's heart if they find out. So they're just.
So the person who's asking the question, can you read the exact question, please, for me, just so I understand?
Yes.
Don't paraphrase it.
Yes, I'm just. Someone okay. I am engaged and I keep speaking to my ex. I keep overthinking my engagement, but I don't want to break my fiance's heart. I want to do the right thing. All right.
Like I said, this is, again, you need to sit down and talk with somebody, man. Don't just send this. If that's your thought process, just taking your words at it, you should not really be in this engagement. What are you doing in this engagement? If your reasoning for being in the engagement is, I don't want to break the person's heart, then your thought process is really, really flawed. Because you're not staying in the relationship because of something that is actually meaningful to you. You're actually only staying in it because of fear of what might happen to someone else. if you choose to opt out. So this is that thought process is not good. So, but if I was you, I would, you need to really take abrupt action. You need to get advice from somebody. And if your heart is really lying with somebody else, you're going to oppress this person that you're entering into the relationship with. There is something glaringly wrong with someone having the, because usually, especially in the beginning of a relationship, there's this sense of excitement and jubilance. And if you're starting off your relationship with your fiance and there's not even that, then there's something really, really wrong there. So you should not stay in that relationship. But anyway, get more advice for a more coherent answer. Sit down with somebody.
There's just similar, just on the same topic. Looks like there's a couple. They're in a relationship. The parents said, I guess the parents of the sister said that there's no nasib in getting to, in kind of, they're not what's the right term? I guess they don't agree with the relationship. So the parents said no nasib without getting to know who I am as a person. I'm interested with won't admit we're in a relationship. Any thoughts? It's a little unclear, but I think what is that there's a couple that are in a relationship, but the parents said that there's no nasib.
All right. So as far as I could understand from what was said, the two are really interested in continuing with each other, but the parents don't want to. The parents of who? Allahu Alam. The guy or the girl, does it make a difference? Of course it does make a difference. But in general, these are the types of things that need to be there needs to be a sit down and a discussion regarding it. Again, in general, I don't advise people rushing or forcing relationships. It's very important that there is some level of acceptance of the relationship by the parties, the stakeholders, the parents, families, and the people getting married, the guy and the girl. It's important. Why is it important that my parents sign off on my marriage? On a number of levels, right? One of the most immature things that I often hear about these types of situations is where people will, badmouth and put down their families to the person that they're considering marrying, not realizing that they're shooting themselves in the leg and they're preparing themselves for a whole lot of potential problems after marriage if this actually goes through, right? Don't do that. Whether you're a guy or a girl, don't, start putting all your dirty laundry out there. If you're a girl, so you go tell the guy, I hate my mother, I hate my father, I can't wait to leave this house, I can't stand these people, they're like this and this and this and that. It's the worst thing you could do. Because if there's a fight between you and him in the future, guess what he's going to tell you? Well, even your father did this to you. Well, even your mother treated you like that. And he's going to realize that you have no one that's going to come to your refuge. You're going to be all alone, right? Don't do that to yourself. Please don't do that to yourself. Same thing with the guy. Don't create unnecessary, a lot of guys, they might do this. Don't create unnecessary barriers between your potential spouse and your mom and your father. Don't do that. Make sure that, this is part of the hikmah and the wisdom. You make sure that you guard the image of all the different parties, because that keeps the hearts together. Right? If you don't do this, it creates a whirlwind of problems that will often make your relationship a victim in the process, right? A whirlwind, I'm telling you, it makes a whirlwind of problems. Make sure, even if your mother says something that's unbecoming about your husband, don't go rush and tell him that. Or your husband says something about your mom, don't rush and tell him that, her that. Don't do that. That creates all kinds of fitna, right? Don't expose your fiance's flaws to your family. Whether you're the guy or the girl, it does not matter, because it creates ridges and it creates barriers and boundaries that it's going to be really hard to erase. Marriage needs a whole lot to succeed on its own. we don't need to make the process more difficult, right? So my advice to these individuals is realize this. Don't have this diehard approach, outlook towards marriage that it needs to be this person or I'd rather commit suicide. Some people are like that. If I don't get married to fulan or fulana, I don't want to live anymore. It's not like that, right? It's important that we figure out, if there's a way to figure it out, then we'll try. Why do they say there's no nasib, quote unquote? Why are they saying this? Sometimes they're not justified, and sometimes they're justified. You would need to have a conversation. Sometimes your parents are absolutely justified by saying that because they might see, oh my God, my daughter, if you get married to this guy is going to be your hell before in your dunya. You might not be seeing it because you're in love, right? But sometimes they might not be justified. Their reason for rejecting it is because they don't like people who aren't Palestinian, or they don't like people who are not Egyptian, or they don't like people who have a certain skin tone. I don't know. What are the details? Is there a reason? Let's have a conversation. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. One question is in regards to someone is a revert, and if they committed zina prior to being Muslim, do they need to disclose that information to their future spouse?
Look, Jazakallah khair for the question. So if you're a revert and you convert to Islam and you want to get married, you've done something in their past that before you were guided to Islam, you had no thought to how damaging it could be for you, or how wrongful it is, a behavior. Should you disclose this? I'll tell this for reverts and non-reverts. Disclosing past sins is a very sensitive thing when it comes to the issue of marriage. It doesn't matter if you're a revert or not. I would not recommend publicizing your sins to people. You should not. Our deen doesn't tell us to do that. Is there a workaround? We said this before. There's a question that often comes up, but I guess we can repeat it just for the sake of benefit. What happens when you publicize sin and wrongdoing? Well, first off, if the person decides to continue with you, there's going to be a whole lot of mistrust. Oh my goodness, this person's done this before, this person has experience. Maybe they'll do it again. Maybe they'll start comparing me to their past. All this type of nonsense, right? There's going to be mistrust. And then the other thing that is going to come about if it doesn't work out is half the community is going to know something that's very private about you before you actually find a suitable spouse for yourself. So what should you do? If you're someone who has a past, the best thing for you to do is to search for another person in the community as a potential suitor that does not have the attitude to care for what's hidden in your past. People have different temperaments, different preferences, different attitudes, different approaches. Some people, they're very clear. I'm someone who would ask about the past. I will, this person, I'm not just people are who they are. I could tell them not to ask all I want, but in the end of the day, some people have this curiosity to them that they can't shake off. I'm going to keep on thinking about it, and I'm going to find myself, I need to ask about it. All right, what are you going to do? All right, this is not the type of person you should get married to. A lot of people have the approach to marriage where, I'm starting on a new page, and I want to build a life with somebody. And I'm not going to ask about their past, they're not going to ask about mine. Let me assess the person in front of me as they are. Are they a good person? I hope I am. Let me build a life with this person. If that's the type of person that you find, then you know what? You continue with that type of person. You should not open up your past. And how do I find that type of person? Well, you know what? Look, this is how you keep your past hidden. If you sit down with a potential suitor who starts asking intrusive questions like that, that is not the suitable person for me. Oh, like, have you ever been in a relationship? In that type of situation, it's okay for you to even lie, to protect your honor and your dignity. But by the end of the conversation, you're going to say something generic. What are you going to say that's generic? I don't think I want to continue. Or, I don't think we're suitable or that we're compatible. I'm not going to specify a reason. But I know that this person, it matters to them. There are some people would come up and say very directly, I've been a virgin my whole life, I've never done anything wrong, and I only want to get married to someone who's the same. In that type of situation, don't feel pressured to say, well, I made a mistake. No. Find a way, Keep a straight face even if you have to lie. Because this is something that relates to your integrity, your honor, your private things that are between you and Allah, especially someone who's reverted to the deen. All of that's erased in the past. So don't answer the question even as it is, but you know, just to guard this person has a right, right? Not, if someone protected their honor their whole life and they want to get married to someone like that, do they have a right and an entitlement to that? Sure, that's what they want. All right? I have a right too to guard my past. So what am I going to do? I'll let the conversation run its course, and then when it comes to making a decision, should we take the next step or not, I'm going to give a generic response. I don't think we're compatible. I don't think we could continue, and I'm not going to specify the reason. That's what I would advise. Don't open that door, because it's a bottomless pit. My advice, I've seen people open this door multiple times. I don't even think I could remember of a situation where someone opened this door and it was all good. It's usually never all good. Usually they end up coming and say, oh man, I feel like I made a huge mistake. The guy liked me so much, or the girl liked me so much, but then I just felt like I needed to say that I made a mistake, or that I did this and that, and now it's just created all kinds of problems, and this is, don't do it. Don't do it. There's two types of people that you're going to face. One person who's very straightforward in what they want in terms of their past, your past, and another type of person who's going to say, you know what, I just want to build a life with a good person. The second type of person is who you should be looking for. Allahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. Just going to a different topic.
But on the other end, I just want to emphasize, don't be that person who lies, don't lie, and then somewhere down the line you say the truth. Or don't do that. It's not fair. It's not fair. Or the truth comes out. That's not a good idea. Don't do that. Don't say, don't answer. So someone asks, I've been a virgin my entire life and I only want to get married to a virgin. And you say what you know is not true. And then you find yourself a year later and say, I want to come forward and say something. And you start saying it's going to cause mistrust that will 99% of the times end the relationship. It's going to cause a whole lot of spite, anger, rage, a lot of emotional issues.
Okay. There's a question about what is the difference between Ashadis and I don't know how to say that word.
Go to the next question.
Okay.
Huh? They don't have a right to know the truth. They have a right to not be lied to. They have a right to not be lied to. That's what they have a right to. Huh? No. Lie to them to preserve your history, but don't continue. You got it? So let me clarify that again. Don't lie to them and continue with the lie, right? But lie to them to guard what, first off, you should not be doing that. This is very inappropriate. You could, if you want to just throw it out there, it should be in an indirect way. It should be like I just said, I've protected my honor in my relationships my whole life, and I would hope that my potential spouse is the same. And just leave it at that. But if you go to someone and say, hey, by the way, I'm a virgin. Are you a virgin too? This would be this person. You just don't even just get up and leave. This person has no dignity and no respect. If someone asks it directly like that, you don't do that to people. You don't put them in a corner where they need to expose their sins, because you could see. So this is how we balance it out. You want the conversation to run its course, and the person's not gonna know why you refused, right? We're just not compatible. Why are you not compatible? Because you have a right. Khalas, you want a person who doesn't have a sketchy past, and I respect that. But at the same time, if I make it my standard to tell people the truth because they deserve to know, then I might go through this process 20 times, and guess what? The whole community is going to know that I've done something very wrong. And that's something that's very awful. I should not allow that. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. Question is from a mom. Mom has a a daughter who is autistic.
Yeah.
She's asking if she should proceed with looking for a husband for her daughter.
So, Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring ease to you and to your daughter and your family and to facilitate your affairs. I know that sometimes dealing with these things could be very, very sensitive. I remember there was one person that came to me, that they were in a dilemma. They didn't have a special need, they weren't a special needs person themselves, but they had a family member who was a special needs person. And this person was finding it extremely difficult to get married because every time someone would find out about their sibling who's special needs, they would refuse. Because people would get worried, they would get spooked that this is something that's genetic and that it might happen with their children. It's a very, very tough situation. Make dua for people. People find themselves in tough situations sometimes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them. Of course you should pursue marriage for your daughter who's autistic. Having a special needs child isn't a reason to deny them from the love and compassion that they deserve through marriage. It's not a reason. Of course not. At the same time, of course, you should be forthcoming. Anytime you have medical issues or things that would affect the life experience in marriage, you need to be very forthcoming with these things, right? This is, like we gave this example, about someone doing a mistake in their past. That's something that you could and should conceal, but sometimes other things you really can't. There's some things that, they're out of your hands. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written the rizq for everybody. We have people in our community and outside of our community who are special needs and they get married and they live fulfilling lives. So I would say no, absolutely not. Don't deny them marriage. Pursue marriage for them. Just be very transparent and their rizq will come to them when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees it. Right? So inshallah they will find someone who's suitable for them. Yeah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Question is it haram to clean?
But just to add to that, it doesn't really relate to the question, but other things, like what are the things that I can't hide when it comes to marriage? Like I said, medical issues. If someone has a medical issue, they cannot hide this. If someone's incapable of having a child, it would absolutely be haram for them to hide something like that in the process of marriage. That's something you can't hide. Or if someone's incapable of having intimacy, or if someone has a disease that's transferable to the spouse, as hard as it is to deal with it, that's not something that you could conceal. That, I pray for anyone in that decision, in that type of situation. Sometimes people make regrettable decisions and they contract certain diseases because of mistakes. And they want to get married, and they're a reformed person. They're in a better place in their life. But now, as they want to get married, they have to deal with this thing that if I don't tell the person, then I'm absolutely oppressing them because they're going to contract the same illness that I have now. That's not going to go away. I can't hide something like that. So that's important to know.
Another question, this is related to, is it haram to clean your eyebrows simply for appearance?
Clean your eyebrows, you said?
Yes.
So look, when it comes to, cosmetic surgeries or doing things that relate to cosmetics is something that's very sensitive when it comes to Islamic law. The only doorway that we have in this regard is restoring things that are not necessarily standard or normal among people, or that are not necessarily perceived as normal. Sometimes it might be like due to medical treatments, like people with cancer patients, or accidents. Those types of restoring a deformity. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Right? Or sometimes something that's affecting your quality of life, like if it's relating to your nose and it's affecting your breathing, then that's something that you could restore. But if it's just for the sake of enhancing beauty, then this is where it's going to be haram. and not allowable. Now, when it comes to cleaning the eyebrows, as we said, like if it's something that's not necessarily normal or acceptable or seen as normal, of course, it's going to go back to, it's going to be subjective. But what they mention is, like, for example, if hair is growing in places where it necessarily shouldn't be growing, like between the eyebrows over here, like for a unibrow, is it okay for someone to clean this area over here? There's no problem with that. Or if it's growing in the areas surrounding where the eyebrows usually are, that's fine. But if it's making my I have thick eyebrows, bushy eyebrows, and I want to make them pencil, no, that's haram. That's not allowable. There's a direct hadith about that, that makes that a source of la'na and removal from mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if it's about enhancing beauty, no, right? If it's about restoring deformity, no problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Direct questions, by the way? Anyone has direct questions? Any direct questions? You're right, man. Really shy crowd today.
Similar question. Is it haram to trim or shave body hair for brothers?
It's not. Yeah. It's not haram to shave body hairs. Yeah.
All right, moving to a different topic. Someone is having issues with...
All right, there's a question back there. What's up? Is leg hairs included? Yes, it's not haram to shave leg hairs. It's not haram. The only thing that we would say that there's a discussion about, so there are certain hairs that should be removed, right? And those are sunan al-fitra. Sunan al-fitra. Those should be removed. Right, like cleaning under the pits and then in certain other parts of your body that are part of cleanliness, about haf al-shawarib, about removing the excess hair on your mustache. Those should be removed. However, the only thing that would be haram in this regard for a guy would be the beard, according to a difference of opinion among scholars. So there's two opinions. The Shafi'i school says that the complete removal of the beard is makruh, right? But the other three say that the complete removal of the beard is actually forbidden. It actually gets to the point of haram. And now, what defines the beard? This is a big difference. There's a variance of opinions. There's one opinion that says that the beard is defined as the hair on the chin and going up to the mustache, this area. This is the beard. There's another opinion that says, no, it actually includes the hair that grows on the lower jaw, right? It absolutely does not include the hair that grows on the neck, right? That, it's part of cleanliness to remove that. Or if someone has hair growing on their, high up on their cheek, that also is part of cleanliness to remove. Right, so those are the two opinions. But any other hair, it would go back to personal preference, I guess cultural realities, whether you should remove hair from your legs or your chest or whatever. Wallahu alam. No.
Jazakallah khair. There's one question in regards, someone is having issues with a particular family member that they live with. The person is very toxic and they're thinking about moving out. They're asking if it's permissible.
The problem with these types of questions is I would need to know the role that you're talking about. All right, are you talking about a parent that's very toxic and you want to move out? Or are you talking about something else? I specify, because it makes a difference. It's not, look, if you were talking about someone who has a very toxic presence in your life that's not a family member, like a friend, or an acquaintance or something like that, it'd be very easy for me to say, all right, minimize their place in your life. Even perhaps don't meet with them at all anymore. It's fine, no problem. But it's not easy for you to make such decisions when it relates to someone as close to you as a parent. It doesn't mean that you should succumb to abuse, but really maybe perhaps I need to gain perspective on this issue. Am I making the right decision? Is my judgment clouded on this issue? What are the consequences this way or that? This is the type of question I'd say, you know what, look, we need to get used to reaching out for help, right? That, you know, a lot of these questions, what they tell me is that people either don't know where to go or are unwilling to really seek help. Don't do that to yourself. If you need help, seek it. Ask questions, go out. Because, you know, this type of forum could address general questions, general advice towards life. But when it comes to specifics relating to your reality, there's always moving parts. And we need to know what those moving parts are to be able to give a more effective answer. All right, there's a hand over there. It was their sister that's toxic. Yeah, you know, it's just going to lead to other questions. Right? Why are they living with their sister aslan? What's the living arrangement? Or is this person married or not? Or, you know, like what's the situation? You know, and you know what? How should you best retreat from that type of reality? Say if it was two sisters, not married, living with each other because their parents aren't around or whatever it is. For example, I would say, all right, you know what? If this other person is toxic, is it okay for you to choose to move out? Yeah, it is okay, but how should I move out? You know, what's the exit strategy, basically? I should try my best not to sever ties with people unless I absolutely have to. And it's devastating for siblings to be willing to sever ties very easily. So we don't want that, you know. So is there a way for you to create an exit strategy from that relationship because you're not happy, because they're a toxic presence? Is there a way to do that? Is there a way to do that at least maintains some semblance of a relationship after? You get what I'm trying to say? So that's what I would say to this person. You're living with this person. You want to leave. All right. Let's figure out how. What's up? Okay. Yeah, I know, but are you talking about a blood sister? If you're talking about a blood sister, then I say it's completely fine. You could remove yourself from that living space, but just do it with wisdom. Let there be an exit strategy. Don't just say, I hate living with you. We're done. You're an awful presence in my life. I never want to see you again, and just walk out the door. It's like, you know, all right, come on. Let me figure out how can I bring it in terms that at least, you know what, I'm not going to cut off ties with my sister. I'm just going to bring it in a smart way. Even if she doesn't deserve it. You know what? Why does she deserve it? Why does she deserve it? Well, look what Allah says about to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقولا له قولا لينا لعله يتذكر أو يخشى. Go to Fir'aun, he's transgressed. Speak to him leniently. Perhaps he might be reminded, or perhaps he might change his ways. Right? Come on. So let me figure out an exit strategy. That's all I would advise. There's nothing compelling you as a sister to live with your sister. But just know how to get out of it without severing ties, if possible. Now, if push comes to shove and it's impossible to leave without severing ties, then okay, khalas, at least we've done our attempt. What were you saying? Oh, yeah, wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. What's the ruling on being an organ donor?
It's okay to donate your organs for the sake of the betterment of the living. There's conditions to this that the scholars have announced. But in general, it's not problematic. It's not an issue. We still should bury the body. It should not. But if there are organs taken from it to benefit the living, then there's no problem with that. Allahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. I guess a similar question. What are the Islamic rulings when it comes to healthcare directives at the end of life? Can Muslims have a do not resuscitate status if extremely ill?
Yes, Muslims can have a do not resuscitate status in the end of life. There's no problem with that, especially if the situation that you're talking about is a terminal illness. Like if the doctors tell you that there's no way for this person to sustain life, and it's more of prolonging the agony. If we're talking about prolonging a person's agony, there's nothing in Sharia that would require you to prolong the agony or the suffering of a loved one. You could have the do not resuscitate clause, you could also, there is all this sense of palliative care in Islam that's acceptable. And, it is not forbidden for someone to refuse medication if the doctors tell them that this medication is only prolonging. There's no cure, so to say, for your condition. If it's a terminal illness, then we have that luxury. If someone is stage 4 cancer and they have to make a decision about taking chemotherapy, but the doctor says, you know what, it's stage 4. Oh, the only thing that this chemotherapy is going to do, besides causing a whole lot of pain, is that it's going to perhaps give you a few extra months. Is it haram for someone to say, I don't want chemotherapy? It's not haram for someone to say that, given that that's the circumstance. The only time that it would be haram for a person to accept medication is if we are relatively certain that this situation is curable and that the medication will actually allow this person to sustain life afterwards. And if they refuse in that type of situation, it's as though they're choosing to commit suicide. But that's not really very common. We're talking about a minimal set of situations. But because usually there's this probability. Oh, maybe it's a 40% chance it'll succeed, or 50%, or whatever. They'll give you some type of statistics. But if it's something that is more than likely curable, and you just need to take this medication, and you will be able to live, and you say, I don't want that, then that's something that's not appropriate for you to accept. Wallahu alam. Yeah.
A question about someone who wants to buy a house or start a business by taking a loan from the bank, and wants to know what's the ruling on that.
So this is something we're often asked about. Buying a house, it's a big issue. There's people, they make seminars on this issue, just to clarify the extent of it. It is not an easy, we don't have an easy solution where we say, all right, go here, and this path is free and clear, 100%, allowable without reproach or question. There's always, and the reason why that is because the cornerstone of the modern day economy is riba. That we don't get to dictate the terms. We have to navigate an industry that has a lot of things that go against our beliefs about money and our financial decisions. So it's not an easy answer. We do have attempts at Islamic models. Some of them are good and some of them are weak, or some of them are better, I guess, relatively good. Some of them are relatively good in comparison to the other options, and others are very weak. It's just really a change of names and not really much of a change to the actual content of the agreement. But some of them are making an attempt. Again, like I said, the whole notion that the banks operate with, and this is how people are, even Muslims, this would be common to their sensibilities, right? That's how ingrained this mindset is. If I'm giving the money, I should be benefiting something. But in Islam, benefiting from loans is exactly what riba is. Because a loan is meant to be for the pure, it's min uqud al-irfaq. It's from the social welfare contracts. You do it to help someone in need. You don't do it as a business model. You don't give it. So any business model that's based off of a loan is going to be riba. Right? But what the creative thing that some try to do is, instead of making it a loan model for the business, they'll try to make it a partnership model. But the problem when you try to make it a partnership model is, if you're the big money bank and you have millions and millions of dollars, you get to dictate all the terms. So you know what? I'm not going to really be a true partner. You're going to get all the risk and I'm going to get all the upside. So how have you really differed from a conventional bank. That's where the question, and then they'll start saying, oh, well, we have some risk involved in, when natural disasters happen, or when some some unexpected situation. Very minimal risk, very minimal. It's not really front and center. Islamic models are profit and loss sharing models. That's what partnership is about. Profit and loss sharing. All right. So, hey, look, basically, long story short, I don't recommend people going to conventional banks, because it's blatant riba. Now, you can only go to that if you absolutely have to. When would you absolutely have to? If, for example, the Islamic banks in your area won't accept you, because they don't necessarily accept everybody. You need to meet a certain criteria for them to accept to give you a loan. Plus, you need a house. When do you need a house? Because it's based on need. Really, really think about it. Sometimes, don't choose to live a life of debt unless you absolutely have to. Right? One of the things that is very toxic in our mindset as a society is we've accepted and embraced this idea of living in debt. And it causes all kinds of stress. Let me live within my means, right? So that's just a guiding thing. Like if someone, all right, I'm fresh out of college. I don't have any kids. I might not be even married. But you know what? I want to go buy a house anyway, just because I want to establish. Why do you do that? Why would you do that to yourself? All right, I have a family and I have 5 kids and I could hardly find anyone to rent me a house, rent me an apartment. And I say, okay, I understand. So really, it's not an easy fix for this situation. Don't go to the conventional banks unless all doors are closed. At least if you go to the Islamic models, you'll have your excuse before Allah. I did the best I can, and I couldn't do anything else. They're the ones who dictated these terms that are really unfair, and they do dictate terms that are unfair. But Wallahu alam. No, student loans are different than housing, because housing you have another option. You can rent if you wanted to. Of course, renting has its downsides. I know, but there's a difference, right? So, both of them are basic needs, right? The need for education and the need for shelter and living. So when it comes to need for living, there's another option. When it comes to schools, is there really another option? Sometimes, but many times, no. It depends. So that's why we'll tell people, you're going for an education, you need to exhaust all avenues. What are these avenues? Let me see. Are there scholarships, right? Are there grants? Are there interest-free loans that I could perhaps pursue? We have the, what do you call it? The what's it called again? ACC, a continuous charity. You guys heard of a continuous charity? How many of you have heard of a continuous charity? A few of you? Yeah, it's becoming a nationwide effort to try to offer solutions. Now, of course, I'm not saying everyone's going to be accepted, but you could try. It's an avenue for you to try to at least lessen the riba that's there. All right, because when you're talking about some of the fields that are there, you're talking about maybe perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time you finish your degree. So, but there's a need for that. So there's a need for education itself. If you exhaust all avenues, what other option do you have? We're not going to tell people don't go learn, right? Wallahu alam. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's definitely a sinful habit that could be very, very destructive. And it could, when we talk about this aspect of our humanity, it's important to highlight fitrah. Because what? Fitrah is Allah's design, how Allah created us. And fulfilling those lustful desires outside of the realm of a halal marriage is something that will mutilate the fitrah. And this mutilation doesn't have an end, right? You know, as they say, وَالنَّفْسُ كالطفل إن تهمله شب على حب الرضاع وإن تفطمه ينفطمي. There's no end to this. There's nothing that's going to quench this thirst. If someone goes down this path, it's only going to progressively get worse. It's going to progressively get worse, and it's going to go from masturbation to becoming an addiction, to becoming a coping mechanism. And I've seen people fall into very difficult situations in their marriages because of this issue, where it literally became a coping mechanism that is something that the person resorts to multiple times a day. And it becomes something that, has detrimental effects on their emotional state and their physical state, right? So, and then it progresses onto pornography, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And then it could progress onto, actually illicit relationships, and addictions in that regard. And then it could progress onto actually, very diluted practices, very abnormal practices when it relates to experiencing intimacy with either the opposite gender or the same gender, or even progress further into وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. I don't even go further. There's no end to this. There's a lot that out there that so I would recommend to someone who's into this, you really need, there's a website, it's a good website that has a lot of content on it that can help you purify your gaze. Look it up. It has a lot of content. Maybe you need to also sit down with somebody to put a plan. I know it's hard to talk about these things, but hey, you know what? If you really want to ilaj and you want to cure, you need to sit down with someone who's going to help you heal from this, because it is like a sort of an illness. It's a disorder, right? Or it could become that, and initially it might be very innocent, but it could become like a disorder that you don't know how to break out of. What does the plan look like? All right, what am I doing with my free time? All right, what am I allowing into my room? Do I have a TV? Do I have a computer? Do I have unfettered access to phones? So you need to be, depending on how progressed the condition is, you need to take aggressive action against it. وَهَلُمَّ جَرًّا. There's a lot more to say about that, but my advice, person who has this, the best thing you need to realize, إِن لَمْ تُشْغِلْ نَفْسَكَ بِالْحَقِّ شَغَلَتْكَ بِالْبَاطِلِ. You need to consume your every waking moment with something that's constructive and positive. Don't have alone time. Don't allow yourself to get access to these gadgets that have. Don't watch willingly. Sometimes it starts off with the nadra, right? What am I watching? I'm watching rated R movies left and right. Guess what? What is that going to do to that? Those hormones that are in my body, right? Just be real. Where am I going? Am I spending hours on the beach watching things that are absolutely, or observing things that are absolutely deplorable? Am I going to spaces that really take me away from spirituality and tazkiyah, right? So anyway, these are some ideas, but again, sit down with somebody, have a willingness to sit down with somebody, check out that website, Purify Your Gaze, and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to help anyone who's dealing with that issue.
One more question?
One more question.
What is the exact proper way to repent for your sins?
What is the exact proper way to repent for your sins? This is very basic in terms of what our deen teaches us. First, regret, because the Prophet ﷺ says, "An-nadamu tawbah." Feel a true sense of regret, right? And then after that, have the will, al-azm ala adam al-awda, that you're not going to go back to it. You need to stop the sin, right? There's no such thing as repenting while you're choosing to continue into the sin. There's no such thing. That's not a repentance. That's a joke. If someone says with their tongue that they're repenting, but they know they're going to do it again next morning, that's not repentance. That's not repentance. Is you stop doing the act, you regret doing it, and you insist on never going back to it. And if there are rights for others, you give them back their rights. These are the basic ways to make tawbah. And of course, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basic thing. Wallahu a'lam. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept. Jazakallah khair akhina Nael. Allah yabarak fikum. تقبل الله منا ومنكم صالح الأعمال. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.